Hello, my name is John Lind, and I am going to show you a simple example of making a code change in a dev environment and then deploying it to test and then on to prod using the new ReleaseOps product. As you can see over here on my left-hand nav, I've got a dev, test, and a prod instance. So I'm going to start with prod. This is where everything is coordinated, where it's the controller, and it is where the assets that you create during the process live. So the key kind of cornerstone is what's called a release. And a release is basically like a scheduled release, as you might imagine. In this particular case, as you can see, I've got a calendar here, and I had September release 1 was yesterday, and September release 2 is today. The release itself has a what we call a freeze date, and the freeze date is basically the point at which all the code needs to be tested and ready to go, basically. And then the release date is the time that it actually executes and makes the deployment. You can also see you can configure where it's going to, in this case, pipeline prod 1, so it's going to itself. So I am going to go back to dev, and I am going to create a new asset that I need to include in this particular release. So for this demonstration, I am going to create a new update set and add a script include to it. So I will start with that. In this particular case, I'm using global, but it could be global or scoped, either way. Go to the global and hit plus. So I'm going to call this, we're going to use the naming convention that many people use, where you put a story name or some other indicator for the work that you're doing in the update set name, and that's fine. As we'll show you here in a second, we will also be linking, like directly linking the update set with the deployment request, so that you actually have a hard connection between the work you're doing and the work you're deploying, and then back to the release itself, which then can be linked to stories, etc. But this is very good, and this is a great convention that will probably continue on, but it won't be the only way that we're able to associate an update set to an actual release. So yes, new hello world script include, because this is going to be a very simple demo. I'm going to submit that and make it current. Cool. And then I am going to go to script includes. I'm going to say new. Close that. And that is it. So I'm going to submit that. And I am then going to go to my update set. And this will be a workflow that many developers are familiar with. Now that I've done my work here, I'm going to mark this update set as complete and save it. And then now you'll see there is a new button called Promote Update Set. This is part of ReleaseOps. So this is what I use as a developer to say, I'm done with this group of work. You could create multiple update sets and associate them to a single deployment request, or what we call a DR. You could group up very many updates into a single update set. You could merge potentially in dev if you wanted to. But ultimately, the basic unit of code deployment is going to be an update set, and once you have that ready, you mark it complete, you hit promote update set. Doing that now. So this is actually if you look closely, you'll see pipeline prod 1. This is actually a catalog item on prod, and this is how I create a deployment request, and ultimately it can then link that deployment request to a release. So if you already have one in place, but in this case we do not, so we're going to create a new one. And the source environment is pipeline dev 1. and you can assign it to release here, or you can allow someone else to assign it later. So it may just be that you want to mark your work complete, put it into the queue, and then later on figure out what releases you want to associate these DRs to. In my particular case, I happen to know that it is September release 2, so I'm going to use that one. And if I wanted to, I could then select ATF test suites to run, but I'm going to leave that for now. Cool. So that was the first bit. So me as a developer decided that I was done with that story, submitted it, and then that's good, and I can continue and go work on something else, right? Now what I need to do, however, is it's time to when it's time to evaluate, what we want to do is we want to assess that deployment request. We can do that from the tool. So let me refresh this page, and you'll see we now have a deployment request. So this deployment request is sitting there, but it needs to be processed. So it hasn't been deployed yet, and it hasn't been assessed. So what we do is an assessment, which is where you potentially run your unit test. Eventually you'll run instance scans if you want to. But once you assess that deployment request, that then, if it passes the assessment, then it becomes eligible to then be deployed on. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Oh, before we do that, we'll just check the, as you can see here, here's the deployment request update sets. So we've got a link back to the environment. Obviously not very readable, but you at least have a hard path back to the source environment and the source update set, right? And you've got the update set name. So that is a really nice feature that kind of was more loosely linked in the past and was based on naming conventions and stuff. But cool, this guy is ready to assess, so I'm going to hit that. And we'll start the assessment process, which includes moving it to pipeline test 2. Excellent. So as you can see, the deployment completed, and the code was moved to pipeline test 1. Very detailed messaging throughout the process, so you can kind of follow the very straightforward, and you have visibility to follow the state of each deployment. And in this case, we can see that it is completed and deployed to test. You can also note that there were no tests associated, but had there been ATF tests to run, those would have executed as well, and then you would have been able to see the results of those. So very good. So now we can return to the release. So at this point, the freeze date has not yet been met. The freeze date is the last time in which new deployment requests can be added. And so the September release 2 in this case is available and active until the freeze date is hit. Once that freeze date hits, you can no longer add new deployment requests to it. Let's jump ahead into the future. So for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to mess with the dates. In the real world, you'd probably have hours or days between the freeze date and the release date. But in this case, I am going to just hack in some time in the next few minutes so that we can force the process along. The release, we met the freeze date. And as you can see, the state was automatically changed, and the release is now marked ready for deployment. What this means now is that when the release date and time is met, which in our case is in 5 minutes, the deployment to prod will start. And as you can see, the release was completed. You can see the state has changed to complete, and you can see the update sets were committed in the activity log. So just to verify it, let's go look at the script includes. And there you can see the John Hello World ABE, which was part of my earlier release. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. John Lind, john.lind@servicenow.com. I appreciate it, and happy coding.